maybe just as a beginning piece, for those that haven't seen the interview between Alexandra and I, or don't know who Alexandra is, I mean, from my experience, I had gone into a lot of fasting and detox protocols before, and learned a lot from different teachers. But something that really drew me to Alexandra, who's a specialist in this field, was her balanced approach, specifically I think targeting, not necessarily just targeting, but I think just her approach in the transitional phases that a lot of people have trouble with, and tend to, because they have trouble with kind of write-off detoxing, or aren't willing to face the firing flame of that transition space. So I feel she's really provided a lot of great support in that space. So that was what interested in me to connect with her and bring her into our last retreat. But maybe I'll let Alexandra speak about some of her work that she's doing now, and her intention behind it, and how that's unfolding.
Well, yeah, I mean, this work for me is it's really unfolding into such a deeper understanding that goes way beyond the body. And what I'm seeing, more and more, is that not only is this the way to live, not only is this the way that we were intended to live. Certainly, I would say for 95% of the time, 95% of the time, this is the way that we should be living. This is the most natural way of living. But beyond that, what continuously amazes me is that when we live in this totally natural way, as much as for many it's radical, and even for me, like I always joke, just 5 years ago, my husband and I stood in the kitchen and sort of like said to each other, those vegans, like, they're radical. This was 5 years ago, and now we are beyond vegans, because we're mainly fruitarians, and yes, still some greens, but, and mucus free and all of that. So it's way beyond vegans, and it sounded so radical. But once your body adjusts to this natural way of being, all of a sudden, this way of being is natural. But what goes on beyond is that the whole mind, your consciousness, aligns with your divine being in a completely natural unfolding. So then all of a sudden, we don't need to do all these artificial spiritual endeavors. We don't need to go off and do all these courses and all this hard work and the sacred medicine, and then kind of have these separate realities. But all of a sudden, we're aligned. We're simply in our divine essence. And all of a sudden, it doesn't seem so special anymore. It's just the way it is. And that's what I bring out. That is the teaching that I bring out.
Wonderful. Well, it's a refreshing perspective, especially coming from, one who may be perceived as working in the nutritional field, or the detoxing field, which, in and of itself is, it's such a small, it's not such a small portion, but it's just a piece of the pie, like there's a full spectrum approach in which has to be taken into account, and I feel like that's where it was funny after reading some deeper work from Arnold Ehret, who is the founder, for those that don't know, is the founder of the Mucus-Free living system, which we'll get into more today, that, his perspectives on kind of the falsehood or the illusion of nutrition altogether, and how, and it's kind of very much reflected in our specialist medical system, which is a specialist for, the right toe, the left toe, the pinky finger, etc. And it's an interesting perspective, which it kind of has found itself also in the personal development, life coaching realm too. So that's a great piece that I respect from you as well. I mean, and I talking to people as well about who are also practicing what you have brought forth, or from other teachers, is a very quick, obvious recognition that fasting goes far beyond just a change in nutrition. It's a perspective of, like you're saying, simplicity, balance, movement, and purpose, unfolding into a deeper sense of love and relationships, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm not going to ramble too much, but you always inspire me when you speak, so it's great. Well, okay, so I had a couple of points. I mean, maybe as just a brief recap from our interview, maybe a couple of minutes, just for people who are just coming in on the importance and the core principles behind the mucus-free living system, what mucus really is, and how we can really kind of dive into it. I think that's really what the purpose of today's call is, how people are really just igniting that as spring is here. And we can get into some core pieces on how to do that and et cetera. So maybe, like a brief overview of that, the mucus-free living, core principles, and just to give some context.
Right. So yeah, this whole living mucus-free system, which is based mainly on Dr. Ehret's work, which is the mucusless diet healing system, but then it's really pieced together with the information around fasting and fruit fasting, and obviously, my 20-year experience in nutrition and in healing myself ultimately. So that's kind of where, it all comes together. But the core understanding is that the whole perspective of medicine and nutrition is really based on such a false foundation. Even if you will, Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, it's based on a human that is sick. And so it's the treatment of disease rather than the establishment of full health or the re-establishment of health. And once I got that, obviously, again, through personal experience, because previously I was so deeply vested in the science of nutrition, in all this knowledge, which was such a big mental masturbation. And the more knowledge I gathered, the more the ego grew, and it was so fascinating. And then to realize it's all very simple. Nutrition and health is simply based on the fact that when there is mucus in the body, which is a response to food, to things coming into the body that the body is not necessarily meant to be digesting. And that is grains, all grains ultimately, and there's a few grains that produce less mucus in the body, like spelt and teff and quinoa and millet. And so those are fine for transition. And then all animal products are also not really meant for human consumption. The fact that we can consume them, the fact that we can digest them, is simply testimony to the amazing adaptability of our body. And because obviously, we all, humanity, originated from warm tropical climate that was filled with fruits and vegetables, and there was no need to go out and kill animals for survival. But because we then spread, that became a necessity. So just because we are able to does not mean that is how we thrive. And of course, we are highly adaptable. And yes, through many, many, many generations, we have adapted to being able to digest all these foods and to, utilize them. But it still does not mean that is where the optimum health is. And once we understand that, and we understand what food produces mucus, what food removes mucus, and what food do we thrive on, then when we play with that, I always like to say, don't stop looking for proof, because you'll drive yourself mad. Become proof. Be focused on becoming proof, and that's simply by feeling, by testing, and then feeling into how do you feel. So that's how I approach this whole system.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a great wrap up. I mean, it's so concise. One thing that was standing out to me in diving into Arnold Ehret's work, and this piece was actually on Professor Spira's website, and he was reviewing an old piece by Dr. Ehret, and I'd like you to maybe expand on this core statement. And that statement is, all disease is constipation. And I laughed at that. I loved it. And maybe what do you think about that? And how, because I posted it, obviously people had a lot of questions about it. So I think this would be a good time to really clear that.
Yes, yeah, it's a great statement, because, and the thing is, it's not just constipation in the colon, constipation as we know constipation, but it's constipation on a cellular level.
Mm.
So it's actually constipation spread through the body. And, the explanation of that is that, again, as we ingest mucus forming foods, such as grains and animal products and nuts and seeds and oils and, all the processed foods, as we ingest them, mucus is formed, and we've all experienced that, like you eat an ice cream and afterwards you've got, or in the morning, certainly. So that's mucus. That's the body producing mucus as a protective layer between the acids that are formed from eating these foods and the body, the organs. So it's a protective mechanism of in mucus is produced so that there's this protective layer. Now, as we were, if we were to living out in the wild and we ate a little bit of mucus producing foods, 5, 10, 15%, no problem. Because as long as we have 80% mucus removing foods, then, and we would not be degenerate as a species to begin with, no problem. The body can handle a lot. But because that's not our case, and we keep on eating mucus foods, the body simply stacks up. And where does all this obstruction that is created by the foods that we eat, where does it go? It doesn't get eliminated, so it gets stuck in the body, in the cells, in the organs. And, we must realize our whole body, besides the bones, is one spongeous tissue. Every single organ in the body is actually a sponge: the lungs, the kidneys, the heart, the thyroid. And so, of course, the mucus gets lodged in between. And again, the body will do what it takes to do away with the waste so that it can just thrive as best as it can. And it can handle a lot. But as the years go by, more and more and more, and also because already we are born with degeneration, so that's why people nowadays get sicker quicker, earlier. There is really nobody, it's very, very rare nowadays to find people that are like the picture of health. And even if they are the picture of health, when you discuss with them, there is no health there. There is a lot of disease. I've yet to meet somebody who is just completely the picture of health, unless they've gone through a lot of fasting and cleansing. And so the constipation that he talks about is really on a deep cellular level. And that is what, through the removal of mucus, through fasting, through fruit fasting, through working with tinctures, through dry fasting, is where we remove the layers of obstruction and we come back to our original. It's a long way to come to our original, but we slowly emerge as these healthy, original people.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, what I found interesting was that, like you had mentioned the last time we talked, which was, the nature of the, when fasting occurs, and autophagy, which is, the nature of the cells in the body kind of like finally breaking down and releasing the water that actually hydrates the body. That piece of also, as you brought up, the nature of emotions being, how it affects water, and of course the body being mainly water, holding into the body for a long time, those same emotions, the same kind of constipated emotions on the energetic, emotional level, which, similar to what I think I shared a post recently with you about that friend of, I think it was a mutual friend who did the, the study, the questionnaire on the most blocked chakra system, or the most blocked energy center in the body. And the most blocked energy center was, the sacral, the emotional center, which of course, resides, in relationship with, things, and primarily for a lot of people being that specific relationship with food. And so that blocked emotional center creates that intensity of that addictive, dramatic type of interest in food. And then, like you're saying, the same result occurs with, the mucus and the addiction to the best picture that I found recently was an image that I had, which was like the nature of everyone's just eating themselves to death, really. Like it's an intensity of fear of death as the primal fear. But then that fear is, it's self-fulfilling through our relationship with food. And so because we're so afraid of death, we just we just eat ourselves to death so quickly. And it's a really interesting, yeah. So I mean, we can get into the motion piece later, but I feel like, yeah, like that constipation, like you mentioned, and you know, the initial image comes with what we've technically felt as constipation, which really is just the symptom, you know, like the long delayed symptom of such a long period of time of emotional and mental, energetic, physical, everything, constipation on all levels of the body, right? And so that's a great clarification that you had there. It's brilliant.
Well,
So,
and the core piece here really is also, it's the nervous system. You know, we are so focused, nutritionists and various doctors and healers, they're focused on, you know, the gut and the liver, but it's the nervous system. When our nervous system is not functioning, and the nervous system is connected to the adrenals and connected to the kidneys and connected to the thyroid, if that is not functioning, our whole electrical, and we are electrical beings, our whole electrical wiring is not working. And so we are basically sitting, all of us, you know, again, unless we've done extensive cleansing, we are sitting in dead bodies, really. You know, we are these decaying bodies where the lights are on but nobody's home. And that's because the electrical system, the nervous system, is not alive. It's not flowing, and so there isn't prana and chi flowing, and then everything just happens in the mind. And so we think we are alive, we think we are connected, and we don't even know how dead and disconnected we are because we are so numb.
Wow, yeah, great point. That's brilliant. Okay, well, if somebody is just naturally coming into this, say it's their first time listening to this, but there's a deep willingness and openness to apply what you have to say, what would you feel like would be the best place to start in that regard?
So I feel the best way is to, you know, again, it's the shift in consciousness. It's the understanding that, yes, fruit and vegetables, I mean, it makes sense, is the way that the body will rid itself of obstruction. And also, you know, the first point is lose the fear of fruit. Because vegetables, a lot of people already, you know, they're there. But fruit holds this huge fear. And I see it with everybody, because there's this idea that there's too much sugar. And actually what hides behind the idea that fruit could potentially be damaging is, again, the emotional connection of, could life be so sweet? You know, could it really be so sweet? There needs to be a hook. It's dangerous to believe that life could be so sweet. So, you know, first I would invite people to get rid of that idea, and also to realize, even if you do this as an experiment for 3 months, you know, there is no way that you can do damage to yourself for living on fruit, or mainly fruit, or a lot of fruit, for 3 months. So relax. You know, you've put a lot of junk into your body. Relax. It's okay to have fruit. And as a first step, to make friends with fruit, to observe your emotions as you move towards a higher fruit diet, and to, at the very least, start slowly and gradually delaying your breakfast, because that's the other big myth. You know, we've been told breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and it's not. It's the least important. If you lose one meal, make it breakfast, and delay the breakfast until, you know, ideally 11 o'clock, which is our natural biorhythm, where we start to assimilate food, and then have just fruit until maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You know, so if you do just that, you delay breakfast until 11, and then you have just fruit until 2 o'clock. And then ideally continue, you know, with greens. That already is going to make a huge difference. And then really see it as an experiment and see how you're going to feel. And initially, you may struggle to feel full, and you may feel, you know, a lot of emotions. And there, it's good to remember that the more obstruction you have, the more you're going to struggle with this. So instead of then going, oh, I'm struggling, it means I need. No, you're struggling because you have obstruction. And so there is this constipation on a cellular level that does not allow the simple fruit sugar into your body. And so the fruit sugar hangs out outside the cells where it doesn't know what to do. And there it's causing problems. But it's not the fruit, it's the constipation in your body.
Yeah. Okay. And so from that standpoint of, well, I think like you mentioned, like the most important piece there is like, it's not the end of the world, you know, trying something for 3 months and it's, you know, somehow maybe not working or not going the direction you had thought or what have you. I feel like that like you kind of mentioned as well at the beginning of today, the whole concept of needing scientific proof or some sort of guarantee that anything is going to work is really like the downfall to life in general, just because life is not outside of experience. So I feel like just the small changes, like you're mentioning, I can really attest to that 11 a.m. piece. I mean, the natural flow of like the body just starts to ignite around that time, especially as you get more subtle, you know. So you mentioned the fruit, so increasing intensity of fruit or intake of fruit, sorry. Then you mentioned, you know, the intermittent fasting to at least maybe 11. Now, would you say that, so say somebody is like really heavily eating meats, grains, dairy, how do you find the best staged approach to that and eliminating those foods are?
So initially, you know, naturally there is going to be some discomfort. And, you know, I advise people, if they're coming off an animal diet, which I did, and then you need to slowly transition. And initially you're going to still have some grains, you're going to be transitioning with beans and pulses so that you can slowly make that transition. And again, that is not because you need the protein or you need the heaviness. It's because there is so much obstruction that your body, you know, if we were to give somebody a sad eater, standard American diet, if we give somebody who's, you know, who grew up on chicken wings and buffalo wings and, you know, all that stuff, and then we put them straight into a fruit diet, we can kill them. And what kills them is not the fruit, but it's the toxicity that the fruit brings up. And then because they cannot eliminate the constipation, the cellular constipation quickly enough, the body essentially, you know, I mean, this is an extreme case, but it can happen that, you know, the body's just, and if we don't listen, you know, we can drown in our own toxicity. And then people go like, oh, the fruit killed him. No, the fruit didn't kill him. It's the toxicity that was released through the fruit that killed him. So we need to realize that when we come off an acidic diet of animal products, we need to have a gradual approach. And that is when then also, you know, tools like enemas become quite important, you know. And as much as people then say, oh, but that's unnatural. It's like, yeah, well, so was your diet, you know?
Well, that element of like going in one extreme and then obviously having to come back into the other extreme is so, it just, I mean, it's like, just look at a pendulum, you know, like it has to, that has to occur to some degree, because that's something that I feel for many that want to like hold on to the principle of the teaching of balance, you know, as an attachment, you know, it has to be balanced, but then at the same point, like for balance to occur, the extreme has to be, it has to be neutralized. And the only way that really occurs is utilizing, you know, advanced tools of technology. Because even on the enema conversation, which, you know, obviously looks unnatural from a technological perspective, but that's not new from a standpoint of like the yogis would use old towels and stuff like that, you know, like, so there was all different ways in which it has always occurred for the millennia of going to one extreme and then utilizing whatever tools are available, even if there are man-made tools, to go in the opposite extreme, to then find that place where there can be a sense of rest. So yeah, I feel, because I noticed that a little bit of, you know, the people holding to the teaching of balance with their approach, but then not actually getting the real results that they desire. because of the unwillingness to let go of whatever the image of balance looks like, you know. So that's yeah, that's cool. Well, I don't know if you had anything to add to that. If you do, but there was a question here from Ivory, and so for everyone else on Facebook, I haven't said hello in maybe 20 minutes or so. So for those on Facebook, please say hello in the comments. If there's any questions or any things that you'd like to say, just leave it in the comments. I'll get to it. But I know Ivory had a question here, and then she said, "Okay, what about if you can easily fast till 2, but then you feel incredibly hungry later in the day? And then my issue is that I overeat." So yeah.
Well, there can be, you know, many things. It can be that you have parasites, which the majority of people do. And so, you know, as much as we can apply a certain amount of discipline, or depending on, you know, some people have better blood sugar regulation. And so, yes, they can fast until 2 o'clock, which is actually quite natural. You know, it's not difficult. I mean, as much as for people, it's like, oh my God, I can fast till 2 o'clock. It's normal. Normal as in natural. But then if you start having the cravings, and typically parasites become active later in the day, typically more so in the evening. That's why most people struggle. You know, they do well until the evening, and then evening comes around and like all hell breaks loose. And it's because the parasites become active. And that's really, I would say, the greatest probability of why you have your cravings. You know, it's parasite pathogens, excess candida, that then demands those foods.
I didn't know about that. About the nighttime thing. That's cool. It's like a nocturnal, the nocturnal parasite, yes. Right?
Oh. Nighttime and sort of full moon time.
Full moon. Oh wow, yeah. Well, that makes total sense. Yeah, that makes total sense, because I mean that was the natural, from a more esoteric conversation, that was the natural topic that always arose, in the sense of, you know, the thinning of the veil at those times. So, you know, entities of all dimensions can kind of come out to play, if you will. So that makes a lot of sense. That's a great point. I didn't know that. Arif, so Ivory, hopefully that answers your question. If you have anything else, okay, she has a continuation to that. So would it be better to eat more throughout the day, or fast for a shorter period of time, so that the binge doesn't occur? I don't think.
Right. Yeah. Well, on one hand, it would be a good idea to go on a parasite cleanse. And, you know, because literally almost everybody, unless you've done cleansing, we're going to be filled with parasites. And especially if we've been on an unnatural diet, parasites are going to be there. And, you know, there it's important to know that if we do go on a parasite cleanse, do it long enough, which means at least 3 months. Ideally, you know, I would recommend a 6 months period where we go after these parasites, because there's various cycles. And because what I'm seeing a lot of times, you know, it depends from client to client, but sometimes people can be on this protocol for 6 months, and only after 6 months they actually start expelling parasites. Because these parasites, especially when we've been, you know, 20, 30, 40 years on this sad diet, or, you know, whatever, like an unnatural diet basically, and medication and so forth, these parasites are really, really well versed in our terrain, and they hide in all sorts of places. And so we can go on this protocol and think, oh, I don't have any parasites. I've been on this for 6 months and I haven't seen any. And all of a sudden, you know, the floodgates open and you start seeing these parasites with every enema that you do. And then you realize, whoa, there is the infestation, and it took this long to actually release them. The other thing is that, you know, the overeating, that's where then the emotions come in. And again, it's kind of like it's a double thing, because the emotions are linked to the parasites. So you feel a certain way because it's the parasite that is actually demanding, you know, the sugary or the meat and all these. I mean, the parasites will never go, ooh, eat papaya. You know, it will go eat whatever crap that you're not supposed to be eating. And so, and then you identify that with your emotion. Meanwhile, it's not your emotion, it's their emotion. But then the other truth is also that as we start fasting and we start lightening the body, all the emotions that we have accustomed to suppressing with various foods, those come out, and they need to be acknowledged, and they need to be seen, and they need to be felt.
Yeah, brilliant. It's like and it's like a kind of like I think it was Gino, actually, a video that he was talking about recently. It wasn't recent, I watched it recently, but speaking of the fasting or the detox flow, where it can be so unpredictable, in the sense, like, one minute you feel great, next minute it's not so much at all, because so much is arising in such a chaotic type of pattern that again, I feel like that's why so many may not persevere through that, because of the chaotic nature of those emotions arising, that one then, because of that constant feeling of need to identify that everything is mine, it creates such a overwhelming sense of shame, or overwhelming sense of, like, what am I doing to myself? Or, maybe everybody's right that I shouldn't be doing this, or, all the chatter that comes in every direction.
Completely. I always say this whole process of fasting and cleansing is really, it's like being in meditation 24/7, or being on a sacred medicine journey 24/7, because you are being constantly faced with everything that you've been suppressing. And so unless we get comfortable with the uncomfortable, and with the chaos that arises, and unless we learn to not identify with every emotion that we feel, or with every feeling and sensation that we feel, and if we're just able to sit and observe and feel it with neutrality, without a story, that's what trips people up.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Well, I was going to ask too, and somebody asked, and maybe a bit something in depth you'd have to do on a one-on-one basis, but someone asked the details of the parasite cleanse. I was going to ask if that was tincture based, and someone asked, would wormwood and black walnut capsules work? But that may be a personal thing, but I'll let you dive into that.
I mean, the wormwood and walnut, it's a good start, but I find, because we are all so degenerate, it needs more. And also, a lot of times, quite frankly, it's not enough to just take the capsules. It's a good start, and yes, you will get a lot of the stuff out, but then there's other parasites and flukes and whatever that need more. And that's where, this whole system of, on one hand, living mucus free, taking tinctures, taking capsules, and then also going into periods of fasting and working with dry fasting. So it's really, working from all angles, because it is actually such a deep-seated issue for most people.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Yeah, we're gonna get into that, everyone, on how you guys could get more support from Alexandra, or just where to find more resources on that, because yeah, it's such a process. I can speak to it myself. It's not something that's just like a 3-day juice class fens, these different things. These are great starts and doorways, but this has to be it doesn't have to be anything, but it can be if one's willing, a continual process of unfolding that opens up into so many doors, which is really exciting too, because yes, like, I mean, the nature of experiencing bliss from coming back to your natural essence also can only be appreciated through contrast, and that's the nature of the contrasting releases of everything from every direction when it comes to this type of protocol. So yeah, it's great. So if there's any other questions we can get into, I know Arif had one. So this is that's a great question. How do you feel about the idea of eating locally, or eating naturally by eating locally, given that most fruit is transported here from the tropics? I guess speaking more of the North American space.
Well, there, again, it depends what your goal is, and what your physical health is. Because if you are struggling with health issues, then the reality is the easiest way and most effective way to heal yourself is through fasting, and then fruit fasting, fruit green fasting, and leaving out all these other foods. If you are, which again, the least people, very few people are really in thriving health, But if you don't have any major health issues, sure, eat locally, but know that periods of deep cleansing are also part of our natural state of being. I mean, that is how we lived, through many generations. Fasting was part of our life. And in that, the 3 meals a day and all this eating has become such an entertainment, really. There's food everywhere. And food has become a way of connecting. It has become a way of entertaining ourselves and others. And that is what keeps us in a state of dis-ease. So we need to shift out of that consciousness and realize the body needs periods of no food. So fasting is a necessity. It needs period on a daily basis of no food. 3 meals a day is an insanity, because we never allow the body room to do its natural detoxification process, So eat easily, sure, yes, there is, one can go into that whole topic, but ultimately, again, we come from the tropics, we have migrated, and naturally we have degenerated our bodies through that process. Can you be healthy still by eating locally and by even potentially eating meat or animal products? Yes, I believe you can, if that is, what you truly believe and feel and want to stick to. But to heal, you still need to undo the damage through fasting.
Yeah, great point. That's always something that people bring up, is that the nature of kind of like going back to, old types of food, which, like you've mentioned before, which I resonate as well. It's like, once the reset, it's like the typical perspective in bodybuilding, like the cut and the bulk, so like there has to be a depth of healing for any rebuild to actually happen, or even a consideration of, some of these other foods on a consistent basis. Because at least in my perspective, the whole idea is that if there's a craving, if there's an unconscious craving, then there's simply a constraining. There's a nature of constraint there. There's a nature of illusion, darkness that's being presented. So if there's a craving that's arisen for some type of food, then it doesn't have to. But the nature of what at least I would be called to is to move into that craving, to find that there is a place where there's no craving, and then from that place, as you mentioned before with your story of eating, that burger with your daughter that one time, and it was just like a spontaneous type of experience. Like that's the nature of the spontaneous way of living that can be done, but only when there's a depth of healing that actually has occurred, or rebalancing, like you mentioned so many times. One thing that comes up too, in regards to Reef's question is in the sense, if we were just to focus on fruit, and I feel like it may be getting into too much perfectionism with it, but if you were to say that eating the fruits that are more resonant with the geography in which you're living, rather than the importing, would you say that that's potentially better for the body, or do you say that maybe the difference is not really that a big of a deal?
No, I do think in that case, eating locally and ripe fruit is definitely going to be better.
Yeah, I feel that. Cool. Well, if there's any other questions, anybody else that has anything, that'd be great to dive into. One thing I want to touch, I took a note on it here. You've spoken about, so you've already kind of outlined that, obviously if you're coming off a very acidic, mucus-based diet, going into a lot of fruit right away is going to be quite dangerous, even to a certain degree. But for those that potentially have been, working with this for some time, or at least in and out of vegetarian veganism, you've mentioned your 3-day kind of fruit fast to kind of test your level of toxicity. And so I did this recently again after eating more quinoas in the winter. And then the first day was somewhat challenging. There was kind of periods that came and gone, and then it was beautiful. Then it was just, it was a real unfolding, which, it just felt really at ease. So that's, because I want to dive into like how people really can benefit from your work and the kind of stages of how you work with people and some of your offerings. So I know you assist people in that, but would you say that's a great place to start for someone who's maybe, beyond maybe just the beginner level, looking to kind of up level a little bit?
For sure. You can sort of do this 3-day fruit only test and see how you do. But then ultimately it's really about, you know, increasing your fruit, and ideally having then in the evening, keeping your a big green raw salad, because the fruit are the scrubbers and the greens are the brooms. So whatever the fruit will bring up, you want to sweep out with the greens. And that's going to be your process, you know, really for several years. And I also don't believe that eating fruit only, I mean, for the majority of us, that's not, and certainly not consistently throughout the year, that's not realistic. You know, we are too degenerate to actually live like that, most of us. And, you know, and we'll feel that. I mean, yes, I can go and have 30 days of just fruit, but then I can start feeling my body, it needs the greens, it needs, you know, it's not even the grounding, but yes, it needs, you know, if you will, the grounding, the fiber, it needs more minerals, because also our soils are depleted. And I mean, there's so many arguments. So we do need to kind of learn to dance with this whole system. But that's where also, once you understand what creates mucus, what removes mucus, then it's not about being dogmatic. And it's not even about being 100% raw, but it's being mucus free and living this mucus free lifestyle as best as you can. In some periods you're going to live at 100%, and sometimes you're going to live at 90%. And as your body strips away, it just becomes your natural way of being. You know, then the thinking kind of like falls away. It's like, oh, okay, I'm just evolving.
And what would you say then is kind of like the consistent type of results that people are experiencing, you know, when it comes to really being consistent with this and continually willing to apply, you know, what you're guiding and what others are guiding in regards to this type of lifestyle?
Right. Well, you know, it's important to know that for the first, I would say, I mean, I'm now about 4.5 years into this cleansing process. And as much as I now feel there's no more thinking, it's just a natural process, but I can still see myself cycling through smaller and smaller, but still healing processes. You know, like the body will thrive and thrive, and I still have moments where I feel like better and better and better. And then I'll have healing crises. But I mean, they're getting smaller and smaller. So initially people will have bigger and bigger healing crises, and they'll feel not so good through periods. And that's when then we start doubting and we go, oh, maybe this is not working. Maybe I need protein. Maybe I need this. And you ride the wave, and the body sheds and adapts and renews. And then you feel like, oh my goodness, I'm on top of the world. I feel amazing. And that's the cycling. And to kind of make peace, or know that for many years, I would probably say for a good some degree or another, you're going to cycle through that. And it is not an indication that what you're doing is not working. It just means that that is how degenerate we are, you know. And then depending also on, and that is a big part, depending on your state of consciousness, that will also determine, and depending on your daily practice. And that's why, you know, a big part of what I teach is that you do need a daily practice. You do need to work with, whether it's Tai Chi or Qigong or Kundalini Yoga, which is kind of what I mainly work with. You need to learn to harness your pranic energy. You need to learn to live off your own, to generate your own energy, and then to embody it and manage it, you know. So that's the whole other aspect. And the more that we do this, the easier then this whole process becomes. Whereas if we just kind of go, okay, I'm not interested in all the other spiritual I just want a diet system that works, that's when it becomes tricky, because this is truly a holistic system. You know, it like, and our nature is divine and is spiritual.
Great. Well, someone asked actually, I'm getting some feedback here. One second. So yeah, someone asked about a little bit in regards to what we're speaking of right now, which is saying that lately she's had some arisings of feeling, like a better word, high. I seem to dilate, tingling in her back. in her back, and she, I mean, she experiences a deep set of maybe bliss. So she's wondering if this is kind of the natural way of feeling that we generally should feel, but don't because potentially we're so blocked up, or in other words, constipated. That's the question.
Totally. Totally. I mean, that's the thing, you know, is that as we start shedding, so we think, and that's the process that I so love observing. You know, people come to me typically, you know, there's two reasons. It's either because they're sick and they've tried everything, and I'm kind of their last resort, and they go, okay, fuck it, I'm ready to do anything. Or it's the person that is on a spiritual journey, has been, and understands the link between body, mind, spirit, and is ready to kind of take their spiritual practice to the next level and to connect the body. You know, that's really the only two kinds of people. And what I love about this is that the sick people that come, that sometimes, you know, they're just sort of regular people that have never done any sort of spiritual work, they've never looked into any energy process, but they work with the system. And I don't even need to tell them anything about divinity, spirituality, energy. And before I know it, they tell me what they are experiencing. And this divine nature is revealed. And then they go into more and more and more living their highest truth. And all of a sudden they change their work, they change their relationship, or they simply start stepping into their true selves. And they live in bliss. You know, they go like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that we could actually feel this good.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, I can back that. I mean, that's the nature of it, Julia, you know. It's hard. So at times it can be hard to believe that life can be so sweet, you know, like you're saying, Alexandra, it can be so deeply blissful and not an ecstatic orgasm all the time, although in a certain sense it's the case. But, you know, there's a subtle, balanced, natural way that just like when you know, look at a stream in nature, it's blissful and peaceful to look at it. It doesn't seem like it's extreme in any sense, or chaotic, or, you know, it can be a little bit, but it's not, you know, this orgasmic up and down dramatic action movie. But it creates this consistent sense of just peace, of an inward subtle bliss that we naturally can still operate with. Because, you know, I can attest to, if you're feeling high and it's not you know, normal for you, then it can be just, you know, debilitating at times, which really at times we maybe need, you know, we just need to be debilitated by the bliss of our own being and rest in that to see what this new reference point, you know, really is. So, so that's great. So thanks, Julia, for that question. I hope that answers that. Alexandra, maybe you can
just to add to this, then this bliss state, you know, because initially it's like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And then it becomes the new normal. And in that transition period, it's like, oh, where's the bliss? And it's like, no, it's still here. It's just become normal. You know, it's the new normal.
Bingo. So Alexandra, then, however, you know, I know you're running your 12-week program now. I think you're underway with that, but you know, what would you say that
it's ongoing?
Oh, is it? Okay, perfect. So maybe you can touch on that for people that really want to dive in more deeply and really get further guidance in your work and yeah, everything that we talked about just on a more personal level.
Yeah, so essentially it's a 12-week program. It's called Liberation Through Elimination. And it dives deep into the practices of Kundalini yoga with a beautiful Kundalini yoga teacher from California, Misha Bosma, and who's actually coming to South Africa to the retreat that we're holding here in May. So that's another option. There's still a space available. And the 12-week program is really concentrated on practices of Kundalini yoga to open up the lymphatic system and to shed lymphatic waste. And then also meditations to calm the nervous system, to open the throat chakra. So there's all of that aspect. And then a specific protocol that kind of takes you through 3 weeks, 4 times, 3-week protocols that then become increasingly stringent, but still, you know, it's a very fluid, it's just a guideline, and then everybody moves according to their own inner movements, and a lot of support and deep sharing within the group. So that's really beautiful.
Really great. Yeah, and for those of you that haven't already, joined in her to Alexandra's Facebook group, I'll make sure to link it, just so you can have, because I really impressed with the community. You know, it's constantly engaging, and in this type of space, like as Alexandra's obviously broken down, and similar to anything that, for those that are connected into some of the groups that I run, you know, the teaching is simple. It's never really extremely complex. It can get complex due to the nature of individual uniqueness, but at least the principles continue to remain. So having that, you know, accountability, connection, community, you know, is so vital. So even if you're just in the initial Facebook group, you know, you can at least be in that environment, that ecosystem that is not battling, you know, every change that you're looking to make, or, you know, shaming for, you know, things that you're doing that may be potentially unconventional, but, you know, you're resonating with, and you know that it's true, because that's all that really matters. And it reminds me of a conversation I had recently, you know, in regards to an individual really wanting scientific backing behind this. And, you know, I could provide some links, and maybe Alexandra can provide more, but the reality is that the main reason we're generally, and in this case it was that as well, the main reason we're really needing the scientific or the guarantee as to why this works is because we're looking to show or prove it to somebody else, so that they can be at ease with our decision. And, you know, that potentially maybe leads to the essence of needing to walk this path alone within the community, but alone in the sense that, you know, it's really up to you, and it's your own experiences that are going to, you know, take you wherever you need to go. So there's one more question here. Corey, would love to hear about your Kriya process, or what Kriyas and how you should do them. So yeah, I mean, I think you may be asking about the spinal breathing technique, which the Kundalini Kriya is similar to the Kundalini yoga that Alexandra's speaking of with Yogi Bhajan. The spinal breathing technique is a bit different, because it's very singularly focused on that spinal breathing technique, but it's going to still support in this. I mean, whether it's the core spinal breathing technique or any of the other supporting kriyas, they're all just working on the same nervous system that comes through the Sushumna and through the spine. And so the same type of emotional layers are going to arise, and then having the support with the food element and the community element, all of that is going to be fairly similar. But yeah, Ivory, if you are asking about the spinal breathing technique, you know, just continuing with that very gently, I find is a really profound method. And then, you know, utilizing other techniques, because obviously, Ivory, you're very involved in the yogic process yourself, and then other forms. One thing I would mention is not doing too many different types of kriyas all the time, because that just creates confusion in the nervous system sometimes. It's kind of like using a lot of different types of mantra all the time. You know, you at least doing one for a longer period of time, you know, for a more consistent light, I find generally works. You know, you don't want to throw a million things into the basket at the same time. You know, it's kind of like the toxicity of the body just completely unloading on you, you know, if you've been eating meat for so long. But so yeah, but if you have any other specific questions, let me know. Maybe Alexandra has something to add.
No, I think, I mean, that's right. You know, it's so often, I feel we want to do so much, and that's the other thing. This system is very, very simple. It's not complex, and when we kind of, you know, whittle it down, it's super simple. The complexity is that we need to shift the mind out of complexity into simplicity, and that's the difficult part. You know, and we need to soothe the overstimulated nervous system to just relax that, oh, it's so simple. And then the whole emotional aspect, and that's really most of my work is actually not about nutrition or food, or, you know, because that part is simple. Everything that I do is around emotions and undoing paradigms. And then the more we undo, and then kind of when people really get it, it's like, oh my goodness, this is so simple. This is so luxurious because it is so simple. And when we then stick to that simplicity, we realize that so much complexity and so much of life that we have bought into falls away. And that whole process also, there is a part of disillusionment that goes with it, because we all bought into the illusion that life is meant to be so complex and so difficult, and it needs to be hard, and you need to work hard at it. And then when you realize it's not, it's just simple. There's a bit of a, and then we need to make peace with that, so that's all I do, really.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, this is great. If there's any further questions for anybody, then feel free to ask, or about anything in specific that Alexandra does. I mean, obviously, if you want to reach out to either of us for anything else, then feel free to do so, and I'll make sure to link her group in the comments for those on Facebook. Same with everyone on Zoom, but I think everyone on Zoom has it already. So Alexandra, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add. I mean, that was a great piece that you just finished on, but if there's anything else you want to jump into, then feel free.
I think we've kind of, we've put it all out there in a nutshell. And more and more when I speak, it started with detoxing the body, and yes, that's the core, that's the tool. But ultimately, it's understanding that this process allows the natural unfolding of true inner freedom. And it's, for me also, after so many years of doing all the spiritual work, all this work out there in the mind, in spirit, it's all in the body. There's a reason why we came in a body. And at this whole time, the zeitgeist that we're in, it's about embodiment. And, the words that I was sort of, want to leave you with is, be careful of complicating, be careful of going deep into, sort of outer space and, DNA activations and, all these like big words. It's simply fully come into your human body and realize that 80% of the work is there. And at the same time, when you do that, when you fully embody, you automatically, like, you don't need anything else, you automatically rise into your divinity. And that for me is the most miraculous process, because that is the truth. Nothing needs to be done. And so it's a universal truth. It's like, I don't care who you are, what you believe in, clean your body, come into alignment with your body, and the magic happens.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, dear Alexandra. It's wonderful to have you as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
These are always fun. We'll have a good recording. So obviously for those that are watching on Facebook, feel free to share this if you found value with it. There's a lot of goodies in this little piece. And the recording will be up as well. We'll put that up, make it available for everybody so we can share it around. And yeah, I mean, the actions can be taken. You have the resources. We're putting this freely on Facebook for really all of you to apply now. I mean, this I always like to say, like, many of the the teachings that are available in the ether and the internet. I mean, these are the secrets of all secrets. These were the things that were locked into the Tibetan and yogi caves for thousands and thousands of years, and now they're available for everyone. And for those 15 or so people that are all watching right now, you've kind of done the work to be able to open yourself to be willing to even hear this and see this. So it really is just up to you to take the actions and do the rest.
Yeah.
So
participation. It's all about participation.
Totally. You got it. Well, thanks, Alexandra. Thank you, everybody. Deep gratitude for this group. And yeah, we will connect with all of you soon. Much love. Well, Facebook is ended. So everyone on Zoom, thanks again, everyone here. If you have any further questions or you want to get more support from Alexandra, just you can send me a message if you want, or send one directly to Alexandra and make that happen. But thanks, Alexandra, as always. This is great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Chat
Wonderful.
soon.
Well, yeah,
Bye.